Beamy Dawson, 29, lead architect at a pretty decent firm. Not one of those giant soulless corporations, but big enough to land the cool projects. My job is basically to draw fancy buildings and make sure they don't fall down. Mostly the second part. The team is solid. It's a real meritocracy, or at least it used to be. If you're good, you're respected. If you're not, you learn. Simple as that. The head of our department is this guy, Ion. He's in his late 50s, an absolute legend in the field. The kind of guy who has forgotten more about structural engineering than I'll ever know. He's quiet, serious, and when he speaks, everyone listens. Not because they have to, but because they know he's right. Then there's Shane, my closest colleague. Same age as me, sharp guy, we came up through the ranks together. We're the main mentors for the new blood. Speaking of which, we have a few juniors on our team. There's Emily, who is ambitious and a fast learner. She genuinely wants to be great at this job. Asks a million questions, but they're always smart questions. And there's McKenna. She's much quieter. Seems a bit overwhelmed by everything. Talented for sure, but lacks confidence. You have to be gentle with her, guide her hand a bit more. This was the ecosystem. It just worked. The old guys like Ayan taught us, we taught the new ones like Emily and McKenna. The knowledge flowed down. The project we were on was the biggest in the firm's history. A new modern art museum. Complex geometry, experimental materials, a massive cantilevered entrance that made all the engineers sweat. It was the kind of project that makes a career. We were all in. Late nights, early mornings, fueled by coffee and a genuine passion for the work. The atmosphere was great, collaborative, focused. We were a well-oiled machine. Then, one Tuesday morning, the partners called an all-hands meeting. This was rare. Usually, they just send a memo. We all file into the big conference room. The senior partner clears his throat and starts talking about the future of the company. Standard corporate stuff. Until he says they've hired a new project manager to optimize our workflow and enhance corporate culture. My brain just shut off. Optimize what? Our workflow was landing us the biggest contract in our history. And then she walked in. Her name was Holly. She was probably in her mid-30s, dressed in that specific, joyless, corporate-approved outfit. She had that look in her eyes, the one that's trying to be friendly, but is actually just scanning for infractions. She didn't have a background in architecture, or engineering, or construction. Her entire resume was HR and something called DEI consulting, diversity, equity, and inclusion. She started her introductory speech with a land acknowledgement, which was weird because our office was on the 15th floor of a skyscraper in the middle of downtown. She talked for 10 minutes using words like synergy, paradigm, and stakeholder engagement. It was like a corporate buzzword generator had a seizure. I looked over at Ion. His face was completely blank, like a stone statue. It's the look he gets when he's witnessing profound incompetence. Shane was just staring at his shoes, trying not to laugh. The juniors looked confused. This was the moment things started to change, the beginning of the end. Holly's first official act was to schedule a mandatory 3-hour cultural sensitivity workshop for the following week. The workshop itself was a masterpiece of wasted time. We were forced to do trust falls and share our feelings about the workplace. Ayan just stood there with his arms crossed the whole time. They asked him to share, and he just said, "I feel like this is preventing us from designing a museum." Holly smiled a tight little smile and said his comment was a valuable contribution to the dialogue. Then she put up a PowerPoint presentation. The topic was deconstructing patriarchal frameworks in the modern workspace. I'm not kidding. She went on and on about unconscious bias, microaggressions, and toxic masculinity. According to her, our office was a seething cauldron of male toxicity. This was news to all of us. I thought we were just designing a building. The final slide was the kicker. It was a list of new company policies. Right at the top, in big bold letters, zero tolerance policy on mansplaining. A dead silence fell over the room. I genuinely didn't know what to make of it. It felt like a joke from a TV show. So, I raised my hand. A terrible mistake. Holly called on me with that same strained smile. Could you please define what specifically constitutes mansplaining in a professional context like ours? I asked. She looked at me as if I'd just asked her to explain gravity. It's when a man explains something to a woman in a condescending or patronizing manner, assuming she has less knowledge on the subject, she recited, like she was reading from a textbook. I pushed back a little. But our entire mentorship model is based on senior, more experienced people explaining things to junior, less experienced people. Most of our senior staff happen to be men, and many of our juniors are women. How do we do our jobs without violating this policy? Ion nodded slowly in agreement from the back of the room. Holly's smile vanished. It's about the approach, she said, her voice turning sharp. It's about creating a safe space where women feel empowered, not lectured. It's about being an ally. Ion spoke up for the first time, his voice calm and steady. Holly, with all due respect, our job is to ensure that a 1,000-ton structure of steel and concrete is safe for the public. This requires direct, unambiguous communication. If a junior architect makes a mistake on a load calculation, it's my senior architect's duty to explain, in detail, why it's wrong and how to fix it. That's not a lecture. That's a professional obligation. The air got cold. Holly stared at him. For a moment, I thought she was going to argue, but she just took a deep breath. I understand that change can be challenging for some, she said, looking right at Ion. It seems we all have a lot of old habits to unlearn. We will be holding further sessions on this. The meeting ended. We all walked out of there in a daze. The vibe was officially ruined. For the next couple of weeks, an awkward tension settled over the office. People were more careful with their words. The easy back and forth we used to have was gone. The men, especially the senior ones, became more withdrawn. You could feel them constantly self-editing, worried that any comment could be misinterpreted. The work continued, but it was slower, less efficient. I tried to ignore it, just keep my head down, focus on the blueprints, and hope this whole thing would blow over. Then came the incident. It was a Thursday afternoon, I think. I was doing my weekly review of the junior team's progress. I pulled up Emily's latest submission for the West Wing's support structure. My blood ran cold. She had made a mistake, a big one. Not a typo or a misplaced line. A fundamental conceptual error in the way she'd calculated the tension load on a primary support beam, the one holding up a massive section of the cantilevered roof. If this design went to the engineers as is, they'd laugh it out of the room. If, by some miracle of incompetence, it got built, that section of the building would eventually fail. It might take years, but it would come down. I didn't even think about it. My only thought was, fix this now. I walked over to her desk. A few other people were around, McKenna included. I kept my voice low and professional. Emily, can I show you something on your screen? She nodded, looking a little nervous. I pointed to the beam calculation. This number here, I said, it looks like you use the standard equation for a static load, but this beam is under a dynamic tension load because of the cantilever. You need to use the differential formula and account for wind shear and potential snow load. I pulled up the correct formula from the appendix in our manual and walked her through the first couple of steps. See how the values change? It's a common mistake. I made the same one when I was starting out. Just rerun the numbers with this, and it should be fine. That was it. The whole interaction took maybe 90 seconds. Emily looked relieved, genuinely grateful. Oh my God, thank you, Dawson. I was staring at that for hours and knew something felt off. Thanks for catching it. No problem, I said. That's what I'm here for. And I went back to my desk. I felt good. I had just prevented a potentially catastrophic failure and taught a junior colleague a valuable lesson. I had done my job. The next morning, I got an email from Holly. Subject, urgent meeting. My stomach sank. I walked into her office. It was already decorated with framed inspirational quotes, mostly about breaking glass ceilings. She didn't ask me to sit down. She just stood there, holding a piece of paper. "Dawson," she began, her voice dripping with disappointment. "I've received a report about an incident yesterday." I knew immediately what she was talking about. I was informed that you publicly and condescendingly dressed down a female colleague at her desk, undermining her authority in front of her peers. I was floored. What? No. I was correcting a critical safety error in a design. It was a teaching moment. A teaching moment, she scoffed. Emily was perfectly capable of finding her own mistake. Your intervention was an example of male-driven hierarchical reinforcement. You assumed she needed your help. She did need my help, I shot back, my voice rising. The design was dangerous, and she thanked me for it. Go ask her. This was the wrong thing to say. We don't need to go ask her, Holly said coolly. The policy isn't about how the recipient feels. It's about the inherent power dynamics of the interaction. The impact is what matters, not the intent bis. She slid the piece of paper across the desk. It was a formal written warning. 4. Engaging in behavior consistent with mansplaining and creating a hostile work environment. My name was on it. It was going in my permanent employee file. I just stared at it. I felt a mix of anger and sheer disbelief. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I was being punished for preventing a building from collapsing. This is insane, I said, looking her straight in the eye. The only thing insane, Dawson, is the belief that the old ways of doing things are still acceptable. Consider this your one and only warning. I walked out of her office without another word, holding the warning letter in my hand. My hands were shaking. The first person I went to was Ayan. I showed him the letter. He read it twice, his expression unchanging. Then he folded it carefully, handed it back to me, and said, "I see." He was quiet for a long time. "They have given you the rules of the new game," he finally said. "It is a stupid game, but you must now decide if you are going to play it." I told Shane next. His reaction was more predictable. He was furious. "Are you kidding me? For that? I saw the whole thing, man. You were just helping her." "Doesn't matter," I said. "Impact, not intent." The news spread. Not officially, of course, but everyone knew. The chill in the office became a deep freeze. And that's when the malicious compliance began. It wasn't a coordinated decision. It was more like a silent mutual understanding among all the senior men. The game had changed, so we would play by the new rules. The mentorship program was unofficially over. The next week, McKenna submitted a set of drawings to me. They were a mess. Basic dimensional errors, incorrect annotations. The kind of stuff a first-year student would get wrong. Normally, I would have sat with her for half an hour and walked her through every mistake, explaining the principles behind each correction. But I couldn't. All I could see was Holly's face, handing me that warning. So I took out my red pen. I circled every single error, probably 50 of them. At the top of the first page, I wrote 2 words, "Please fix," and I put it back on her desk without a word. I saw her when she picked it up. Her face just crumbled. She looked like she was about to cry. I felt like a monster. But what choice did I have? Explaining it to her would be condescending. Pointing out her mistakes was my job. The only safe way to do it was with 0 context, 0 explanation, 0 humanity. This became the new normal. Shane adopted the same policy. He started responding to all questions from junior staff with, "You should check the manual," Or the even more passive-aggressive, "That's a good question. Let's see what solution you come up with." Ayan became a ghost. He sealed himself in his office and only communicated via email. His messages were brutally efficient, stripped of any and all pleasantries or explanations. The effect on the junior staff was devastating. Their development ground to a halt. They were making the same mistakes over and over because no one would tell them why they were mistakes. Emily, the go-getter, became visibly frustrated. She knew she wasn't learning anything. She tried to ask me why I was being so distant, but I just gave her some vague corporate excuse about empowering juniors to find their own solutions and respecting the new communication guidelines. It sounded like something Holly would say. I hated myself for it. McKenna, who was already struggling with confidence, completely shut down. She stopped submitting work. She would just sit at her desk, staring at her screen for hours on end, terrified of getting another red-marked paper back. The project, our beautiful, career-defining museum, started to bleed. Deadlines were being missed, first by a day, then by a week. The quality of the work being produced by the junior team was abysmal, and the senior team was too busy triple-checking everything and redoing their work to make any real progress on our own tasks. Holly, of course, was oblivious. In her weekly progress meetings, she would present charts showing increased junior autonomy because they were asking fewer questions. She saw the slowdown, but she attributed it to growing pains as we all adjusted to a more equitable workflow. She was living in a different reality. The final confrontation was inevitable. It came about a month into this new, broken system. Ayan called a meeting with Holly, just the two of them. I found out what happened later. He walked into her office and laid it all out for her. No emotion, just facts. He showed her the project timeline with all the missed milestones highlighted in red. He showed her the junior team's performance metrics, which had fallen off a cliff. He explained in simple, direct terms that her no mansplaining policy had destroyed the firm's mentorship culture and was putting the entire museum project in jeopardy. He told her that in a field where mistakes can cost millions of dollars and even lives, clarity is not a microaggression, it is a requirement. He begged her, for the sake of the project, to walk back the policy and let them do their jobs. And Holly listened. She heard every word. Then she looked him in the eye and said something that sealed her fate and ours. "Ayan, what I'm hearing is that you are feeling uncomfortable with a work culture that centers women's experiences. Your resistance to this change is a classic defense of an outdated patriarchal system. Perhaps the issue isn't with the policy, but with your own inability to adapt." That was it. She had accused a man with 35 years of experience, a man respected by everyone in the industry, of being a fragile dinosaur who couldn't handle a world where women had a voice. Ayan didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood up, said, "Thank you for your time," and walked out of her office. He walked straight to his own office, typed up his resignation, and handed it to HR. 2 weeks' notice, after 35 years at the firm. The news hit the office like a sonic boom. Ayan quitting? It was unthinkable. He was the firm. Everyone knew why. Everyone knew it was Holly. And for me, that was the final straw. This wasn't just a stupid policy anymore. It had driven out the best of us. It had poisoned everything. I wasn't going to play her stupid game anymore. I was done. Ayan's resignation wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a statement. The day he announced it, the entire atmosphere of the firm shifted. It was no longer about a bad policy or an annoying manager. This was an existential threat. If a man like Ayan, the foundation of the entire department, could be forced out, then none of us were safe. The office became a ghost town. The low hum of productivity was replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. People would just sit at their desks, staring at their screens. but you could tell no real work was getting done. The juniors were terrified. Their main anchor, their ultimate source of knowledge, was gone. I went home that evening and knew what I had to do. This wasn't a job anymore. It was a matter of professional integrity. I couldn't be part of a system that actively punished people for being good at their jobs. I called Shane. I didn't even have to make a case. "I'm writing my resignation letter," was the first thing he said when he answered the phone. "Me too," I replied. "See you tomorrow morning." There was no big debate, no agonizing. It was the simplest, most obvious decision in the world. We walked into the HR office together the next day. The HR director looked like he'd seen a ghost when two of his lead architects showed up at his door at 9 a.m. We handed him our letters. He read them, his face getting paler with every sentence. "This is because of Ayan, isn't it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "This is because we can no longer do our jobs," I said. "This firm has made it clear that competence is less important than ideology." He tried to talk us out of it. He mentioned our futures, the prestige of the museum project. It was like he was speaking a different language. He didn't get it. He said the partners would want to speak with us. We agreed. The partners called us into the main boardroom an hour later. They looked like they hadn't slept. They offered us more money, a significant raise. They offered us bigger titles. We just shook our heads. "This isn't about money," Shane told them. "We can't work under Holly. We can't work in an environment where our professional judgment is treated as a thought crime." "Just give us a few weeks to sort this out," the senior partner pleaded. "Ayan gave you 35 years, I said. "You sorted that out by letting him walk. Our decision is final." And that was that. Our resignations were accepted. Within 48 hours, 2 more senior architects and one of our top engineers quit. The exodus was complete. The firm's entire brain trust for the museum project, the team with decades of combined experience, had walked out the door in less than a week. All that was left was Holly and a handful of terrified, inexperienced juniors. We spent the next 2 weeks in a strange limbo, just documenting our work for the handover. Holly avoided us completely. She wouldn't even make eye contact in the hallway. She held a pep rally for the remaining staff. We weren't invited, but we heard about it. She apparently talked about this being a tremendous opportunity for the juniors to step up and claim their space. She framed our departure as a positive thing, a shedding of the old guard that was resistant to progress. She was delusional. She was the captain of a sinking ship, telling the passengers that the water flooding the lower decks was actually a new swimming pool. On our last day, Emily came to my desk. She looked lost. "I don't know what we're going to do," she said. "None of us are ready for this." "You're more ready than you think," I told her. Which was a lie, but what else could I say? Just trust your instincts and double-check your math. Leaving the building for the last time felt strange. Not sad, just final. Shane and I went for a beer. We didn't talk much about work. We didn't have to. The real fallout began the following week. I heard all of this secondhand from some friends still in the admin department. Holly was now, by default, the sole leader of the project. She had to get on the technical calls with the contractors and the structural engineering consultants. It was a disaster. The engineers would ask specific questions about material tolerances or reinforcement schedules. Holly would respond with phrases like, "We need to approach this with a collaborative mindset," and "Let's circle back on that after we've empowered the team to find a synergistic solution." They thought she was joking at first. Then they got angry. These were serious people dealing with serious safety issues. They didn't have time for corporate word salad. Progress on the project didn't just slow down. It stopped. Completely. Nothing could move forward without senior approval, and there was no senior staff left to approve anything. The client, who was investing hundreds of millions of dollars into this museum, started to get nervous. They had been hearing whispers about the mass resignations. They called an emergency progress review. They wanted the entire project leadership in the room, the firm's partners, Holly, and the lead architects. The firm partners had to explain that all of their lead architects had quit. The client was, to put it mildly, not happy. They demanded a full technical presentation from Holly to reassure them that the project was still on track. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The meeting was held in the biggest boardroom. The CEO of the client's company was there, along with their own team of architects and engineers. It was the highest level of scrutiny possible. My source told me it was the most uncomfortable 2 hours of their entire professional life. Holly stood at the front of the room with a PowerPoint presentation she had clearly made herself. It was full of stock photos of diverse teams, smiling and meaningless charts about engagement metrics. The client's lead engineer let her get about 3 slides in before he cut her off. "Ms. Holly," he said, his voice cold as ice, "we are not here to discuss your company's internal culture. We are here to discuss the critical path analysis for the next construction phase. Please pull up the revised structural plans for the main gallery's roof truss system. We have some concerns about the load distribution." Holly just froze. She started fumbling with her laptop, looking for a file she didn't have, and wouldn't have understood if she did. "The team is currently optimizing that," she stammered. "Optimizing what?" the engineer pressed. "The plans were due last Friday. Are they done, or are they not?" "We're taking a more holistic view of the deliverables," she tried. The client's CEO, a man who looked like he ate nails for breakfast, slammed his hand on the table. "Enough!" he roared. "Stop speaking in riddles. We have $100 million hole in the ground waiting for steel that hasn't been ordered, because your firm can't provide the approved plans. Where is Ayan? I want to talk to Ayan." The senior partner had to explain that Ayan no longer worked for the company. "And Dawson? And Shane?" the client asked. "They've also left, sir." The CEO just stared at them. He looked from the partners to Holly and back again. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You've lost your entire senior architectural team in the middle of the most complex project you've ever undertaken, and you've put this HR person in charge of it?" Holly tried to speak. "I'm the project manager, and I can assure you—" "You can't assure me of anything," the CEO snapped. "You can't even answer a basic technical question. You are completely out of your depth." He stood up and pointed a finger at the senior partner. "You have 48 hours to fix this. Get your old team back, hire a new one, I don't care. But if you don't have a competent lead architect in this office and approved plans on my desk in 2 days, we are pulling the contract, and our lawyers will be in touch." And then he and his entire team walked out of the room. The second the door closed, the partners all turned to look at Holly. I was told there was no shouting. It was much worse than that. It was cold, surgical fury. The senior partner just said, "Holly, in my office now?" They didn't even sit down. He stood in front of her and laid out the damage. "In the space of 6 weeks," he said, reading from a list, "you have alienated and driven out 3 lead architects and our most senior engineer. You have single-handedly derailed a $200 million project. You have destroyed our relationship with our biggest ever client. You have exposed this firm to catastrophic financial and legal liability." She tried to defend herself. She started talking about the toxic culture she had inherited, about the necessary changes she was implementing. He just held up his hand to silence her. "The only toxic element here, Holly, is you. Your incompetence is breathtaking. You have turned our most valuable asset, our people, against us. You didn't build a new culture. You just broke an old one that worked perfectly well." "You're fired," he said, "effective immediately. Your access has been revoked. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings." The whole office watched it happen. They watched as 2 security guards stood by her desk while she packed her things into a cardboard box. Her inspirational posters, her male tears coffee mug, her little desk plants. She was openly crying. No one said a word. No one offered to help. They just watched in dead silence as she was escorted out of the building for the last time. It was a brutal, humiliating end, and it was justice. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was the senior partner. His voice was different. All the arrogance was gone. He sounded tired and humbled. He apologized. He admitted they had made a monumental mistake in hiring Holly, and an even bigger one in not listening to their senior staff. He asked what it would take for us to come back. Ayan, me, Shane, all of us. Ayan led the negotiation. It was masterful. We didn't just get a 30% pay raise, though we did get that. We got it in writing that the architectural department would have full autonomy over its own projects and personnel. No more non-technical managers with ideological agendas, ever. We all came back. Walking back into that office was strange, but good. It felt like coming home after a long, stupid war. The relief on the faces of the junior staff was palpable. The first thing I did was walk over to Emily's desk. "All right," I said, pulling up a chair. "Let's take another look at that roof truss, from the top." She gave me the biggest, most grateful smile I've ever seen. The machine started running again. The work got done. The museum is being built as we speak, and it's going to be magnificent. Turns out the secret to a successful project isn't about creating safe spaces. It's about hiring competent people and then letting them do their jobs. Our new unofficial corporate motto is DEI. Don't employ idiots.